Hello, so today we're going to be, or I'm going to be teaching you how to make a tree branch with some little flowers. This is part of a cherry blossom blanket that I'm going to be doing. The other square that I'm using, I'm not going to do a tutorial on it because she has a pretty good pattern written already, is I'm trying to remember the name. It's called In Trouble on Ravelry, and I think it's like a $3.99 pattern, which isn't terrible. Pretty easy to follow. It's got good instructions. She also has a pattern for a branch. I didn't care for it personally, and I knew that I can do my own branch, so I figured I'd just wing it, do my own thing, and I like how it turned out. So that's what I'm going to be showing you today. So to get started, you're going to need a blank square. This is the no seams, no spaces granny square. I have a link to it on my blog. I believe in my YouTube videos, I have a YouTube video on how to make it. So as soon as you get a square and you use, let's see, I'm using an H hook, 5mm H hook, and let's count rounds here. Counting rounds on grinding squares is really easy because you just go up the corner. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. When you've got 8 corner holes, then you can stop and come back to this video and we will start on our branch. So pause here if you don't have your square done. If you do have your square done and you're ready to go, the next thing you're going to need is some branch colored yarn. So I'm using Hobby Lobby's. I love this yarn. It was not $3.99. I got it on super sale. I'm using the color Graphite. It looks brown next to the yellow, but it's really like a gray. So the color for the main square is a linen, and it's all Hobby Lobby's. I love this yarn. And then the purple flowers that I'm using is this orchid, which I've already used a fair amount of because I'm using it for the base. So those are the 3 colors that we're going to use, and it's not a complicated thing to do. I was going to write a pattern, but it's much easier for me to show you how to do it than write a pattern because there's a lot of weird things basically. So it really starts with a chain, and then we're going to go back and start with some slip stitches. Then we get wider with some half double crochets, getting into some double crochets to form like the thicker parts. And then I'm going to show you how to get these kind of cool twists and turns in this other branch that goes out. It's really a lot easier than it looks. There's no embroidery involved. It's all crochet techniques because I'm not an embroiderer. So, and then the flowers are really, really easy. That I might just type up the pattern. I mean, it's not really even a pattern. I think it's kind of like common knowledge I just kind of, anyway, I'll write it up and you'll see it's really easy. It's just some chain twos and some double crochets and some chain twos into a magic circle, and that's it basically. So it's all easy. You can all do it. If you know how to do a single crochet, if you know how to do a slip stitch, if you know how to do a double crochet, you could probably do this project. So it's not a super beginner, but if you've made any kind of round object or square object, you'll understand how to do it, and you'll be able to do it. So let's get started, shall we? Okay, so we have our blank square and we have our graphite yarn, and I'm just putting the square here more for contrast than anything else, because you know, I have this black background and that's not the easiest to see there. So we're going to try and do this like this so that you can see a little bit better. You're going to want to leave a little bit of a tail to secure the branch to your square. So, you know, like a good amount, what this is about. Yeah. Don't be too precise about it. Yeah, it's not about measuring everything. And I'm just making a slip knot to get started. And we are going to start by chaining 40. Now the base of this branch is going to be done separate, and then we're going to be punching through and creating those little branches. And that's kind of like the weirdo part. But it'll make sense. So start by chaining 40. Okay, and if you didn't know how to do that, this might be a little bit too advanced for you. So if you had trouble chaining 40, you might not want to start with a branch for your square. Might want to just kind of go back and practice that, because it'll get quite a bit more complicated. So you see we have our chain, and you see how flexible it is, right? Like you can basically mold it to whatever you want. And we're not going to make the exact same branch on every square. I'd like it to be a little bit more organic and flexible. I don't want everything super rigid, because it's a tree, right? Every branch is different. So my goal is to make every branch different. But I'm starting with 40 because that's kind of like, you know, a good length, because we're going to be twisting it and turning it, and I don't want a teeny tiny branch that only has, you know, a couple, well, that might not even, yeah, I might go back on my right. Yeah, it might be okay. It might be okay to do that. And it might be okay to have a branch that goes all the way across, right? That has no flowers. It's just a branch that just kind of reached across your square. It might be okay to do that too. So let's just leave ourselves open to the possibility that everything is okay, and there are no real mistakes, right? So we're going to start swinging back, and at about the point where I want my second part of the branch to go up, I'm going to stop. So if you want two really wide branches, you'll want to stop about here. If you want two really short branches, you'll want to stop about there. So it's just kind of eyeball it, trust yourself. It's crochet, it's yarn, so you can always pull it out. There's no real mistakes, right? It's trial and error. Do what feels good. Do what you think looks good. Don't rely so much on the numbers, is what I would suggest. So I don't want my branch to start off really thick at first, right? Because branches go to the skinniest, and they just kind of gradually, very gradually get thicker. So I'm going to do about 5 slip stitches back. So just a slip stitch. So if you don't know how to do a slip stitch, you might want to go back and look at a video on how to do slip stitches. This is not like a super beginner tutorial. I'm going to assume that you know how to do all these stitches, or you know their names. So, but I'm just slipping back, and you can see that our branch is already starting to form. So that's going to be the skinniest part of our branch, and I don't know, I'm not really counting, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we did about 5, and then we're going to switch to a half double. So you're kind of have to keep in mind where you want your curves and your dips. So the curves are going to be where your increases are going to be, and your dips are where you're going to be clustering stitches together or skipping a stitch here and there. So we do not want our branch at the end to be like this. We want it to be kind of curvy and natural looking. So I did 5 slip stitches, and now I want my branch to kind of curve down just a little bit. So I'm going to do an increase in the next one with my half double crochets. So I'll be doing 2 half doubles in the same next stitch to do a little increase. So that's my stitch, and 1 half double and 2 half doubles, and that gives me the start of my bend. So then I'll do 3 more half doubles, and we'll just kind of see where we are. Like I said, I haven't written anything down, so this is like just like a real free floating kind of a thing. So like, see how nice that little turn is right there, right? So maybe we have a turn back, right? So we have our branch, and it's starting to turn down. We did 2 increases. So now we don't want it to go straight for too long, or else it's going to look like a hook. But what if we brought it up this way just a little bit? Right, so we did 3 half doubles in a row here. Right, so we have, no, we only did 2. So we have our increase here. That's really hard to see with this dark thread, but there's 2 here, and then we have 2 standalone. So I'm going to do 1 more. So it's like an odd number. I find that odd numbers make everything better. And then I'm going to skip 1 just to give it a slight curve, not too much, just a very, very slight one. So I'm going to skip that next chain hole, and I'm going to go into the next one. And that will bend us back slightly in the other direction. That way our branch has a nice little crookedy thing to it. And then I'm going to continue with half doubles. So you're going to want to do half doubles for probably most of the length of your branch until you get to that point where you want to split off onto your second branch. So you're going to want that all half doubles. It just kind of looks a little better to start. You don't want it getting too thick, because like the branches don't get super thick unless they're very mature. But we're talking about a fruit tree branch. So if you've ever seen one in real life, you know, they're about the thickness of my finger, and then the second branch will go out like that, and then the little fruiting branches will come off of those. So, which we'll be adding when we actually attach it to our square here. So we're going to go down, I'm just going to kind of keep going here. We got a few little crooks in our branch. You don't want it too wiggly, or else it's going to start looking like a worm or something weird. But don't worry about it too much, because everything looks better once you add the flowers. So we're going to go down until we get to where we want the split in our branch. And I'm just going to do like a few that are just straight, because this will, when you start applying it, will have a little bit of bend. You don't want to bend it too much, or else it will start popping up like that, and it won't look, you want it to be able to lay flat, but have a certain amount of, natural give that you can place it where you want. So as you can see, we've got about that far. Let's put this a little bit more in the center so you can see that far to go. So maybe we want our branch to start here, and maybe do like a short branch that kind of goes up and kind of goes down. So I'm going to show you how to do that now. So you're going to want to, we're going to curve it, depends on how you want to curve it. We're going to have it go up from this, we're going to call this the crotch of the branch. So from your last half double crochet, right, our hook is still in the top, we haven't taken it out or moved it or anything, you're going to want to start chaining up from there. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We've got 7, that looks like a little bit too short. 8, 9, 10. Let's see what 10 looks like, and this is how I do it. I just start counting and like laying it down flat. Don't want to stretch it, right? Because then that's not going to give you any kind of true thing. So we got about 10 there, and that's looking okay. But what if I put in some curves in that one? It's going to look a little shorter. So I'm going to go for 20. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and we're going to see how this is going to look once we have it down. See, there's a little bit of an imagination, but so let's lay that down and see how that looks, and that looks kind of nice. So we have 20, I chained 20 here. That kind of turns, and that kind of looks like the beginnings of a really nice little branch. So then we're going to do the same thing going back. So I'm going to slip stitch more than I slip stitched over here, because branches aren't all the same. So you want to make sure you really vary it a lot, because the more you vary it, the more it's going to look like something that really does exist in nature. If you have them all exactly the same, it will look fake. I mean, obviously it's going to look fake because it's yarn, right? But it won't look right to your eye. Yeah. So that's 3. I think we did 5 over here, so I'm going to do like 10 or something. I'm going to go like halfway down the chain. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and these will naturally have like a little bit of a curve. You can straighten these the slip stitches are a little bit more flexible for turning than when you get into the thicker stitches. So I did about 7. Right. Let's count again. If you don't know how to count your stitches, I'm going to show you right now. So this is our first slip stitch. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we did 8, and that's looking about right for me. I don't think I'm going to go 2 more, because then that's not going to look quite right. So I'm going to stitch the next one, because I want my branch to turn opposite of this one, just so they're not all bending the same direction. I want it to look as different as possible. So I'm going to skip the next stitch. That way I can create my curve, start bending it back, and I'm going to do a half double in that next one. So that bends our branch that way. I'll give it a nice bend. So then I'll do 3 more half doubles, and then I'll lay it down again. So like, you don't have to follow exactly what I'm doing. I mean, you can, but if you start working on it and you start seeing, oh, I like how the branch is going this other way, Yeah, I'll start doing that. All right, so that's kind of gives us 2 branches going 2 different ways. Maybe I want to turn it back just a little bit. I think that looks nice like that, personally. So you kind of bend it where you like it, make a little mental note where that bend is, and that's where you're going to do your increase. So maybe we increase it 3 times to give it a really severe bend, or we're going to increase it with 2. So I'm going to show you how it looks with 3. So we're going to kind of go, it was about that one. As you can see, I'm not super precise because I know I can just always rip it out. So this is where, this was the chain where I wanted my bend. So I'm going to put 3 half double crochets in there and give it a little bit more of a drastic bend. So that was 3. And then I'm going to do 2 more, and then we're going to lay it down and see how we like it. And if we like it, we'll keep it. And if we don't, we'll just kind of rip it back. And that's how it goes. So that's kind of nice though, right? Because then if we go straight for the rest of the way, look at how nice. Just kind of have to cover it up and see, and you've got a nice kind of natural looking bend and wave to the branch. So I like it. So I'm going to keep going and just do 1 half double all the way until I reach that top. So that's where I am right now. Do 1 in that top one, and then now we've got like this lovely little gap where we got our 2 legs for our branch, and then we got to get back down to here, right? So it's super easy. You're just going to yarn over, and we're going to do a half double back into that chain that had the half double where we chained off of. So we're going to go right back into that one right there. And just pull it like that, and there we go. We got our 2 branches that are going off. So now I'm going to do 2 more half doubles, and then we're going to increase the thickness of our branch to a double crochet for the rest, because as branches get closer to the trunk, they get thicker. So I want the rest of the branch to be kind of, we're getting close to the end. You have to think about where your flowers are going to be, right? If you have your branch too big, you're not going to have a whole lot of space. So we have our branch. We haven't quite decided how we're going to put it onto the square. It doesn't really matter at this point, as long as everything's kind of fitting within the square. All right, if you have it, if your branch is like already off and your tail is way over here, that's not going to work, as you want to be able to sew it onto your square and have it all fit. So if you want it to reach all the way to the end, you can do that. That's fine, as long as anything that fits within the square is workable. So I did 2 more half doubles, and now I'm going to be switching to double crochets just to start widening up that branch. And now we're going to want a couple more twists and turns. We're just going to do 2 double crochets, and then I'm going to do an increase. I'm going to do only 2 double crochets into this next one. Alright, gotta pull my yarn. Haven't gotten to that point in the skein where it just kind of comes out really easily. So I've got a nice gentle curve in there, and then maybe we want a really extreme curve back. Right, like maybe that's where like a branch got cut off the next year when you were pruning it. So we're going to do that. So I'm going to do 1 more in the next, because we have our increase, then 2 regular ones, and now we're going to do like a really extreme turn. So if I skipped like 3 chains, to make this extreme, I'm going to end up with a hole here. And I don't want a hole because I want it to look like a solid branch, right? So I'm going to do a series of 2 clusters, or decreases, I should say, double crochet decreases. So if you don't know how to do that, I'm going to show you really quick, because that's not like a super common thing that you're going to do if you've just been doing branches or whatnot, or branches, blankets. So here we go. I'm going to make sure my hands are in focus here. So you yarn over like you're doing a double crochet, and you're going to go through the motions for the first one, right? But you're not going to finish. Then you're going to go into the next stitch, right? So I yarned over, right? So that's first of all. So I have the 2 stitches left over. I'm going to yarn over, and then I'm going to go into the next stitch, and I'm going to go through the motions of the first part of a double crochet. So I have 2 on there. So that would be 1 decrease, right? But I want to be super extreme on my bend, so I'm going to go into the third one, do the same thing. So now I have 4 on my hook, and then I'm just going to pull through all of them like that. So that gives me the first. Now when you're curving crochet this to the left, it's a lot more difficult to get like a good look than when you're doing an increase, because you have farther that you have to pull it. So I'm going to do another series right now, no more straights, of the same thing. I'm going to do a 3 double crochet decrease. So we're going to go into the first one, pretend like we're doing a double crochet but stop. Then I'm going to go into the second one, pretend like I'm going to go through the motions of the first one, and then stop. And we're going to do it again. So that's a 3 DC decrease, and then I'm going to pull through all of them. And that gives me a much bigger kind of curve. That way we can have a little bit more drama. And then do a regular double crochet, maybe another regular double crochet, and then we get to see how it's looking. So this is looking pretty nice. So we got our nice big bend here, and so we can have our branch kind of coming out. Then I'm going to do, so I don't want to have like end with an L and then a big long straightaway, so I'm going to do another increase just to bend it back a little bit. So just kind of see how you're doing. Make sure you don't have any like very geometric notes going. You want it to be as organic looking as possible. So if you need to go out and look at a tree or look at a branch, do that, or Google image some. So I'm just going to do a little increase right here, just a real subtle one, and then I'm just going to go straight to the end. So don't be afraid to play around with it. I mean, if you have to watch the video a few times to kind of understand the thought process. And there we go. Last one. So now we can kind of lay it out and decide how we're going to go, and see how we have that nice dramatic bend and a little bit of a subtle bend. So you want a series of like drama, because maybe there was like a little branch that was here, right, and it was just kind of growing like this, and then that one got cut off, right? So it got cut off right here the year before, and just created this nice bend, right? And then maybe this next year it'll get cut off right there. It'll have another really cool bend to it. You kind of have to think about that. So now comes the time where you get to decide where on your square do you want your branch to be sprouting out of. Do you want it down here in the corner? That's kind of cool, right? Have it in the corner. I'm kind of digging that. Or you can have it coming out of the middle of the side. and branching out toward each corner. That's kind of cool too. I'm thinking I'm kind of really liking it coming out of the corner. Besides my first square, I'm going to bring it out really quick so we can show you again. I have it coming out of here, so that one next to this one, pull you back up a little bit. You see how different that's going to look? Right? That's not bad. I'm liking that. I think that's kind of cool. Sorry for the jiggly camera there. So yeah, I think I'm going to have it come out straight out of the corner and kind of go up. So now you're going to want to cut your tail, and then we're going to be reattaching the same color yarn, and I'm going to be, I call it a mattress stitch. I really don't know what the real name is. I probably should look it up because it's just very unprofessional just not to know what it's actually called. But there we go. So we got our two tails here that we're going to be sewing in to make sure that nothing ever comes unraveled. And we're going to be just setting that. You don't want it over your corner because when it comes to joining your squares together, you're going to want to work into this last row of stitches, right? Because ultimately this is going to be a blanket. So these stitches here need to be left alone, or else you're going to have a bear of a time doing it. So come in from that corner so that you can still see all of those stitches and work them. And then what I like to do is pull my tails through about where I want it. So it's going to be about like that. See how nice and neat that is already? And I'm going to flip it over, and I'm not going to weave it in because I don't like weaving things in until I absolutely know it's exactly the way I want it, right? Because what if I get to the end and I decide this branch is hideously ugly? I'm going to want to undo it and redo it, right? So, oh, that's kind of nice the way it bounces down to here. And then we can kind of see there's still a little bit of play. That's why I said don't be too crazy about how exact you are, because there's still a lot of play. You know, just giving those subtle curves really allows you to really make them more dramatic or less dramatic, depending on what you want. But that's kind of nice. So this will stop. So you're going to want to stop when you get it exactly the way you like it. You know, play around with it a little bit. When you get it set exactly the way you like it, and maybe imagine like some flowers over here kind of clustered, or pre-make your flowers and kind of hand place them. When you get it to where you like it, get out some pins and tack it down with some pins. So that's what I'm going to do now, and then we're going to start right back up. Okay, so you have everything tacked down. Now, don't be too OCD, okay? So like that would be my advice. Don't be too regimented about where your pins are. Allow for some flexibility, because the yarn, as we go through sewing it down, unless you use a needle and thread, is gonna need to move a little bit. And if you are too strict about where you have things, you're going to end up with some puckers, and it might not look as neat as you want. So that's my little tidbit of advice. So now we're going to start with a slip stitch. So get your slip stitch going, and then we're going to take out our needle. So we have our little slip stitch here. And what we're going to do is we're going to be punching through these stitches along the side, and we're going to be tacking them down through the back. So it's a little fiddly. I apologize in advance. I don't know how to do this completely flat so that it's not like extremely awkward to view on the video, so I'm going to do my best to do it straight. So as you can see, I punched through the first stitch, and I'm not being super, I guess, serious about where I'm punching through. Just find a good place and go through. Don't judge yourself too harshly. And then I'm putting my slip stitch on the back, and what we're going to be doing is pulling it up through. So now we have our working yarn is on the back side and our hook is on the front side. So now there's going to be a lot of turning and twisting and looking at the back. It's just kind of how it works. So get in a space where it's comfortable to hold the yarn in the back and the hook in the front. This is going to take a little bit of patience. It's a little fiddly when you're first starting doing this. If this is the first time you've done this, be patient with yourself and go very nice and slow. That way you can keep your tension kind of soft and not too hard, because like if you hold it way too hard, it's going to just pucker a whole lot, and if you're too loose, then it's going to be too loose. So get to the point where you're holding it nice and kind of sturdy, and try not to poke yourself with your pins too much. So we're going to start our first one. So as you can see, we have our stitches at the top, and I'm just going to try and go through each one. So I'm going to go in through there. It's really not the easiest to see, but you can see how there's like little holes. I'm not going to go through these loops at the top because I don't want to really make my branch too much wider. So I'm going to try and be working within the line. So if we consider the top part of our chain, our outline, we're going to be working just on the inside of that. And because we're working in the same color yarn, it's not going to be very noticeable if we skip a stitch or we go into the same stitch. It will not show. So don't be too worried about where you're putting it in. Try to put it into the base of your posts here. I'm going to try, sorry, I keep getting off camera a little bit. So this is the base of my post, and as you see, I'm going to put it through there. Don't be too concerned about where putting it in here. Put it in where it fits. Don't force it. Allow it to find its own way. That's my advice. So you went through both. As you can see, I kind of went through some weird part of my solid granny square, and then I'm just yarning over and I'm pulling up that loop through, and we're just slipping it. So it's like a series of flat slip stitches is what we're doing all the way through. So we're going to go into the next one, bring it up, and just kind of slip through. And you're going to be working all the way up. So I tack it down because there's so much moving this way and this way and this way and backward and whatever. I don't want it to be too floppy, but that's about the only reason why I tack it down. I let the branch kind of do its thing, and it kind of seems to work out. So every once in a while, every few stitches, you can look and make sure everything's flat. When you come to a pin, release it. That way the yarn can fall where it's supposed to, and then you can be a little bit more, like if you really want that to be a little straight. I think we had a little curve in there, so I'm going to allow the curve to stay. Remember that it's a branch, it's not a square, so we're going to allow it to kind of do its thing. And I hope you're getting how to do this. It's just slipping through, and then I'm just grabbing this yarn on the back and pulling it up. And in the beginning, when I was first learning how to do this, it was really hard. I was always bringing up the color from, like, I'd be bringing up this tan color. So be patient with yourself if you're not pulling it up right away really easily. It's kind of a gentle, you don't want to be too, it's really like a tension issue is what I found. Is for me, it was my issue of why it was so difficult to do that, this stitch at the beginning. But you see, it just kind of makes like a really nice straight line. Right. And then when you get to your curve, it's easy to start it on the edge. It gets a little bit more fiddly when you get to the center because of how you have to kind of scrunch up your square to get it. But just be patient with yourself. Now we got to a corner, and as you can see, it's tacked down. It's really solidly in there. It's a really nice way rather than using a needle and thread, and then you've got stitches that really don't look like crochet stitches. This puts a really nice edge on everything. So I'm a really big fan of doing this. There we go. We got, this is our dramatic curve. And I'm just kind of holding it with my fingers. This, my left hand is kind of holding it where the tack was. That way I'm getting the curve the way I want. And if I don't like it, I mean, this is how easy it is to undo. It just literally, you just start pulling it and it'll just back right out. And then you can find the loop, bring it up, and start going forward again where you want. So rather than like when you're sewing, when you're pulling it out, you know how it's so much more difficult if you sew it in the wrong direction, or you get really involved and you just start bending it straight line and then it gets all puckered and not nice. It's a little bit more difficult to undo sewing than it is to undo this method. And I like, you know, I make a lot of mistakes sometimes. So I like to be able to undo and redo quickly. So I'm just kind of marching up the side of my branch until I get to my next pin. And then, so see, I'm getting towards the center of the square here, and it gets a little bit harder, and I apologize again if I keep pulling my hands off. It gets a little bit harder to hold the yarn. So you just kind of, I just start kind of rolling up the sides and then try not, that's why you want the pins, is to kind of hold it gently into place so that you can go up, because it does get a little bit harder to hold. And I'm at the point now where I don't have to be looking for that thread, but in the beginning I was doing a lot of this, looking for the thread and then pulling it through and then working it through the next one. I was doing a lot of that. As you get your tension right in the back, you start not having to do that so much. So at my next pin, I make sure that what I've done so far is nice and neat. Roll this up. So I have my yarn in the back still. Hold it the best way I can, and I just kind of do like this swooping thing in the back to try and to figure I'm grabbing it. So having a lot of tails back there. That's why I didn't sew on the flowers first, is because then I end up with a lot of tails and then I'm sweeping up that. So we're up to our branch, and now I want to show you, so we're at the first part of our branch. So we have our two thick branches. So if we want to do like some little stems that are coming off the side, in my I'm going to show you. So we have more than the 2 branches here, right? We've got a few little ones that are coming off. So I'm going to show you how I did those little antlers. And like this does work. Like if you wanted to make antlers, it's kind of the same thing, because what are antlers? They basically look like branches. They're just like a different color, right? Or not even sometimes. So say right here, we want to have a little branch coming up, like a really skinny one. I'm going to show you how to do that. So we're going to march up to about where that was, which is a little bit past our corner, and then we're going to make a little skinny branch that kind of comes off, you know, something that maybe is going to hold some fruit, depending on what kind of tree we are, right? So don't worry about working in those corners. Just kind of pretend like the back is a very solid piece of material, and then you won't have any problems. If you start thinking like, oh, I gotta go through like a very particular place in the back, then you can end up doing weird things. So we're about right here, and say we want a branch to be about the length of the end of that, just kind of coming up right there. What do we think about that? Let's get this to where we were first visualizing it, and I'm not too sure about it. I don't know, I'm a little undecided, but let's do it, because if we don't like it, we'll just pull it out, right? So now we're going to go off the branch and onto our square, doing exactly the same thing. And that is how easy it is. As far as spacing goes, where you're putting your hook, don't worry too much. You could stretch it really far and do it like that, and it'll just be long, right? So if you want it to be the size of your stitches, you can kind of see how big your space is, and then just kind of punch through like that, right? Don't be too, so I'm kind of going into the side of the branches, right? And so there's a little tiny branch that's coming out there. Go as far as you want. You can put strange angles into it if you want, have it going back towards the other way. And then to get back to the main branch, you're going to want to follow your same line. So either go into the stitch if you want to keep it really, really skinny, or if you want to fatten it up just a little bit, I go right into the side all the way down, and you just kind of copy your work. So, and again, it's a little tricky holding that yarn behind and not seeing it, but I'm just, should have a camera underneath with a GoPro table camera, but I'm just, like when I punch through the bottom, I'm going to try and pretend, I'm just basically going like that. I just do like the sweeping motion, and I assume that at some point I'm going to grab that and pull through, right? And that's what I'm doing. I'm holding it, so got the yarn underneath, and I'm just going into the side of it, not super, you know, being as laid back as I possibly can about it. And I'm just following it down until I get back to my main branch. And just got to be sweeping around and grabbing that yarn until you get back to where you began, and then we're going to continue tacking it down. Okay, so, didn't sweep up that yarn. There we go. there. So there's our tiny little extra branch. So you can always add more branches. I don't know if I like it or if I don't like it. That particular one, I'm going to leave it because I know once I put a flower here, I think I'm going to really like it again, right? Because you can do like a little cluster of flowers right there. That'd be nice. And then once I have like another little branch up here, that'd be nice. Maybe another little one over here. And you can get really complicated or you can leave it really simple. It's basically up to you and how you're feeling at the moment, right? And then when you come back, you'll have your mind completely changed and you'll redo it. If you're anything like me. So, go up our other branch, and I kind of feel like I reached another needle, and I pull it out before I do anything because I want this to be able to, pinning it down sometimes makes it buckle like that, and I don't want to be pushing my stitches because I want this all to lay as flat as possible. So I pull them out right before I get to it, and then make my decisions when I'm holding it, because like I'm holding it the back and the front. I hold it in place while I go. And then my index finger just holds the yarn. So I can sweep up and get it. There we go. Now that's one end of the branch, and then if you want to kind of make it taper a little bit more, you can go a little bit farther. Like that. Now it's going towards the end of the square. So that's why you want to kind of make it a little bit shorter, just to give yourself a little bit more play when you're going through and doing this mattress stitch. So, like I said, it's a lot of turning around. I find like when I turn, I have to have my hook pointing in one particular direction, or else like my hands just don't want to do the work, and you'll find your comfort zone, and it may look nothing like mine. So there we go, and then we're back onto our branch. So now we have like we have this open on this side, right? So we're going to want to march down the other side. So it's just tracing the line all the way down. I think it gets a little more fiddly to hold. So now we're going into, we were in the bottom of our chain, which is a little bit easier to get into. And now we're going to be going into the top. So as you can see, we already have like our little V-shaped tops of our slip stitches and half double crochets, right? I go right in the middle of it. So it would be basically, if you were doing a standard pattern, they would call it back loop only, right? Rather than flipping up this top one and going into both loops like you would normally do if you're going like doing this, right? These are going through both loops. We are going through only this top loop, and that's how we're going to be tacking it down. So it goes a little slower for me. It might go faster for you. It might go slower. But so you're going in through the top stitch and then going through the bottom. And so then you're just basically, it kind of creates a double of what you had. So I'll keep it looking exactly the same. And then if you want to veer off into another little branch, wherever you want, just, I almost feel like my hook is just marching. So I always say, if you want to march off into another direction and create a little branch, you can. If you feel like you have enough little branches to put your flowers, then, you know, just trace along the line and keep going around and hold it as best you can. Make sure you're not squishing it this way or stretching it too much. Kind of basically have to get kind of the feel for it, but I'm going to march off just a wee tad and create like a little stub of a branch of where we pruned it last year. Right, so there's our little stub, right? That's where we clipped it last year. Keep it fresh, because we like to prune our trees. There we go. And like I said, if you don't get it right away, this was really hard for me to learn how to do. I must have wrestled with how to hold the blanket. I think the first thing I used this on, I was making a hooded cowl, I think. Was that when I first started using this stitch? I think it was a hooded cowl that I was making, and they had the stitch in it, and I was just like, what? I cannot hold my yarn. I can't do anything. Like, I could not get it. I could not hold it correctly. And then it just kind of had to go really, really slow. Let's see it there. How nice that little stub looks. Really like that little touch there. I think I might add one of those to each one of my branches now. How nice. Alright, so now we are going up our next branch. Oh, I split my yarn. You see that right there? I split it. So I'm going to grab that loop and redo that, because I don't want to lose part of the yarn and then have it break and create like a big fuzzball. Okay, so I'm going to stop there and finish up the second branch so that this video isn't like 3 hours long. It's basically the same thing going up the other side. I'm just going to be removing these pins, that way there's not too much, because like I'm just going to leave that last one in there, and then I'm going to let that kind of go back. Oh, got a little dog hair already. It's amazing. Dog's not even in this room. Doesn't ever go in this room, and yet there's a dog hair. There you go. How about that? So I'm going to march my mattress stitch up this way, maybe make a little stub right there, because like, why is that bend there? Probably because there used to be a branch over there at one point. So I'm going to make a little one of these over here, and then I'm going to march up and march all the way back down to the beginning, and then bind off. So we will join back the video when we get to that piece. So you should be all done. This is I'm having a little bit of trouble with my videos. I think it might have gone a little bit too long. But here is your square when you're all done. You should have 4 tails at the end to sew in. Your back should look kind of like a weird little tracing mess. Don't worry about that too much. You know, we'll be showing the pretty side of our blanket. So that's it for this video. Stay tuned for our next video where we'll be putting on the flowers.